This is how to play Texas Hold'em, which is the most popular poker game. I'll begin with how the cards work, and then I'll explain betting. The dealer will begin by giving 2 cards to every player. Then each player will look at their cards secretly. Now 1 card is dealt down, that's called the burn card and not in play. Then 3 cards are dealt face up, which are in play, and that's called the flop. Now the dealer burns another card, and then flips the next card up, which is called the turn. The dealer then burns 1 more card, and flips the final card up, which is called the river. Now each player will use their 2 cards, plus the 5 in the middle, to make the best 5-card hand to see who wins. If nobody has any pairs or high hands, then the high card wins. In this case, it's the king. However, if another player had an ace in their hand, then they would win. The next best hand is a pair, followed by 2 pair, and then 3 of a kind, which can be beat with a higher 3 of a kind. The next highest hand is a straight, which is 5 consecutive cards that are not all the same suit. Here you see 2 different straights, but the one on the top would win because it goes all the way up to the ace, which is higher than the king. The next highest hand is a flush, which is any 5 cards that are all the same suit. Next we have the full house, which is 3 of a kind and a pair in the same 5-card hand. The 3 of a kind determines how strong your hand is, so in this case, the bottom hand would win because the 9s are higher than the 6s. Then we have the 4 of a kind, which can only be beat by a higher 4 of a kind or a straight flush, which is 5 consecutive cards that are all the same suit. And the highest possible hand is a straight flush from the 10 to the ace, which is called a royal flush. So in this scenario, this player has a pair of queens. The next player got a flush with 5 spades. This next player got a straight from the 10 to the ace, but unfortunately that will lose to the flush. The next player has 3 jacks, which also loses to the flush. And the final player didn't catch anything, so they'll have to just play a high card of queen and lose to the flush. Now let's talk about betting. First, you'll have to establish the value of the poker chips. In this scenario, we'll say greens are worth 25 cents and blacks are worth $1. The player after the dealer has to place a bet before the cards are dealt, which is half the minimum bet for the table, and we call that the small blind. And the second player after the dealer has to place 1 full bet before the cards are dealt. We call this the big blind. The point of the blinds is to force betting so that the pots get bigger, and since the deal rotates around the table, everyone has to be in the blinds at some point. Now the cards are dealt, and then the third player has the choice to either call, raise, or fold, which means that player is out of this hand and can't win or lose any money, but they'll be back in the next hand. But for this example, let's just say that every player called. The player in the big blind position still has the option to either check or raise. But for this example, let's just say they checked. Now all the chips are pushed to the middle of the table, and the flop is dealt. Now there's another round of betting, starting with the player to the left of the dealer. And again, each player has the option to call, raise, or fold. A raise must always be at least twice as much as the last bet. And if a player folds after they've already put money into the pot, they forfeit that money and they're out of the hand. If at least one other person calls the raise, then the game continues and the next card is dealt. Now there's another round of betting, and as long as 2 players stay in, the final card is dealt. Then there is a final round of betting before the cards are revealed to see who wins the hand. If at any point there is only 1 player left in the hand, that player automatically wins the pot and doesn't even have to show their cards. In each round of betting, there is a maximum of 3 raises allowed after the initial bet. And if a player does not have enough chips to cover the bet, they can push in all of their chips and declare that they are all in. That player is still in the hand, but is only eligible to win the chips that are already in the pot. The other players can still raise and call each other, but the player that's all in will not be able to win that extra money. A side pot is created by having all the other players match the final bet from the player that went all in, and those chips go into the main pot. Then whatever's left over goes into the side pot, which can only be won by the players that contributed to it. And that's how to play No Limit Texas Hold'em.